Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Insulation Intel webinar, Johns Manville Canadian Building Insulation Products. I'm Rachel Hunt, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Before we dive into introductions, I'd like to go over a few logistics. To start, we're working from home, so there is an opportunity for some technical difficulties. If something does happen, we'll try to troubleshoot it as quickly as possible and address the situation. If for some reason we're unable to fix the issue, we will record it separately and send out a follow-up of this presentation. Next, if you have any questions or concerns throughout the webinar, you may submit them at any point during the presentation via the Q&A feature. We will address these questions live at the end of the presentation. And if you don't see your Q&A feature on your screen, you're able to pull it up in the right side of your screen, look for the series of circular icons, and pull up the one that mentions Q&A. Select that option in the dialog box to submit questions will open on the right of your screen. A quick note before we get started, this webinar is for educational purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for a professional engineering design, consultation, or documentation that may be required by building codes, contracts, or applicable by law. If you have any questions after the webinar, you can refer to our specific application guidelines and instructions located in the product sections of our website. Additionally, we will follow the webinar today with a survey. This is your opportunity to provide us with feedback on how we did today and ask any additional questions that you might have about the topic of the webinar or suggest new topics for future webinars. This survey is part of how we deliver the JM experience to you. And the JM experience is based on 4 pillars of the JM culture, and it's listed in the bottom left corner of every slide. We believe it's critical to make sure we hear, understand, and respond to your needs in order to deliver the best interaction to you. And we offer webinars like this one to help educate the market and offer a tool and resource for you and your business. But we understand that this isn't just a one-way street. We value your feedback, and it's a key component to helping us evolve to better meet your needs. So if you have any comments or suggestions as to how we can better accomplish this, or even if you feel like we missed the mark today, we encourage you to fill out the survey, and we use your feedback to improve our webinars and provide information that has the most value to you. We also are frequently asked if we send these presentations upon their conclusions. While we don't send the presentation itself, we do post a recording of it online for you to watch at your leisure or share with your colleagues. This ensures that you have the presentation within its full context. We also send an email to you once it's live on the website. So with that, we'll get into introductions. Joining me today are Tom Calzavara, Eric Dake, and Brian Verschoor, and I'm going to hand it over to Tom to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Calzavara. I'm the Senior Manager of Technical Services, and I've been with Johns Manville for 35 years. I'm going to let you guys have a minute right now so you can write down my contact information and phone number if you need to get a hold of me after the presentation. So let's just wait a minute before we move on to Eric. Thanks, Rachel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Dake. I am the Senior Product Manager for our blowing wool, mineral wool, and Polyiso sheathing product lines, and I've been with JM for 19 years.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Verschoor, Senior Product Manager for our Bats and Rolls product line. I've been with Johns Manville for about 15 years and have about a century of family experience with the company. So we'll hold here and let you jot down my info if you would like to try to get a hold of me afterwards. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the agenda to kick us off. We'll start with a brief discussion around the considerations when selecting the right insulation for your project. Then we'll move into discussing the insulation products that JM offers, including the key properties, available sizes, and R values, et cetera. Finally, we'll finish off introducing our remarkable Tech Connect team and the wonderful resources that they offer. So some insulation considerations. When looking for the right insulation for your project, the primary consideration is how it's going to control the heat loss or gain in your building envelope. The primary role is to help control temperature inside of the building. However, depending on the building or region, you may be interested in other properties that insulation can provide as well, like vapor transmission, sound, precipitation, or airflow. Depending on the product, you can control these items without additional requirements, like a vapor or air barrier. Spray foam or polyiso, for example, can be installed to act as a vapor barrier. Also, curtain wall or mineral wool can behave as a drainage barrier to protect against precipitation. Two other items to consider when determining the right insulation for your project are going to be sound control and fire resistance. As we go through this presentation, you will gain an understanding of how JM's product insulation portfolio covers all these considerations for you. So we'll start with fiberglass. Primarily, the controls around your R value are going to be thickness and density. If you hold a constant density and increase your thickness, you're going to get a better R value. Conversely, if you are restricted by a cavity constraint, you may increase your density and hold the thickness constant and also increase your effective R value. You can also vary both and increase the R value accordingly. So those are your primary levers to pull while trying to affect your R value. It's available for both wood and steel framing. The fundamental differences there are your wood frames are going to be 16-inch on center. So the insulation for those cavities are 15 inches wide and held in by a friction fit. And for the ceiling applications, you're going to have 24-inch centers, so you'll have a 23-inch effective insulation. For steel framing, you're measuring the wall of the steel stud to itself, so you have a full 16-inch cavity there that you fill with the insulation. And upon moving up the R value range for wood studs, you do encroach on the steel stud dimensions, but fundamentally that's the differentiator there from a dimensional perspective. For the Canadian market, everything we do is going to be unfaced fiberglass. It provides effective heat and sound control in the walls, ceilings, and floors. Can be used in all construction types. It's available in various R values, all the way from the thinnest product offering in an R8 up to a ceiling application in an R50. The widths we covered on the previous slide, but the thicknesses are varied and engineered for the appropriate R value and performance within whatever your application is. Sound Shield is essentially for use in the multifamily housing and interior walls of a house where you don't necessarily have an R value by code to dictate which type of insulation you should be using, and are primarily going to reduce sound transmission coefficient ratings when installed correctly. So also used in all construction types, wood or steel, and its primary function, while also affecting thermal performance, is for sound, since you're not governed to have to use insulation in your interior walls. We also make a PEBS Blanket, which is designed as filler material for pre-engineered metal buildings. It's available as a pre-cut blanket, not to be confused with UMBIs, which are your metal building insulation that's laminated. This is going to be your unfaced product, used for again, sound and thermal characteristics. The UMBI is the PEBS big brother or big sister, and it's designed to be laminated for use in your metal building applications, which will also give you your vapor barrier. It's used in both the roofs and the walls, depending on the thickness of it, and it's available as a pre-cut blanket. There are various R values for this product as well, and all the information is available on jm.com. But each of these are specified to fit into the pre-engineered metal building design. From a spec compliance perspective, there is a plethora of information on jm.com for each individual product line, so I won't bore you with the details of that, but generally speaking, all of our products are designed to comply with the appropriate specifications for their applications. For an example, UL flame spread and smoke developed is a pretty key characteristic for most building applications, and maintaining a flame spread of below 25 and a smoke development characteristic of below 50 is pretty key. So there's a lot more information there if you want to go into jm.com and grab the data sheets, but we can answer any other questions available after the webinar. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Brian. So moving into another form of fiberglass, which is blown-in insulation. So this is very similar to what Brian was just discussing. This is molten glass that is fiberized, but instead of putting a binder or a glue on it, as Brian showed in his products, this is unbonded, so it is loose. It is compression packaged and put through a machine. Those machines can range in size from a small machine that you would rent from a local DIY, home hardware, Lowe's and the like, that can fit in the back of your car, to a large-scale machine that's mounted on the back of a box truck for folks who do this all day, every day, and do multiple houses in a day. We have two brand names of loose fill fiberglass: Climate Pro, which is what is geared towards our professional usage and which makes up a vast majority of our volume. And we also have Attic Protector, which is geared toward the DIY, as I just mentioned. This is blown into an attic most typically at a certain thickness for a given R value. Another application is that you can use it as a net and blow in walls, where you put a mesh fabric over the open stud cavity, put a hole in that and fill that cavity with loose fill fiberglass. Does a tremendous job of filling every nook and cranny to get that solid installation. But most times this material is going to be up in your attic. One of the biggest competitors to loose fill fiberglass is cellulose, which is recycled paper that is treated with chemicals and installed a similar fashion. Fiberglass has several advantages over cellulose. You get a lot more coverage per bag. We don't talk about pricing in these kinds of forums, but when you compare pricing from bag to bag for each of these different products, it's important to make sure you're paying attention to the amount of coverage you get out of a bag. Typically, fiberglass is going to give you much more coverage per bag than you will get out of cellulose. And all of those, fiberglass is naturally resistant to water, whereas paper obviously is not. So in order to be able to be used in these applications, it must be treated with various chemicals, which fiberglass does not need to be containing. Our final loose fill fiberglass product is our Spider Plus. This is blown into open cavities in new construction most typically. It is blown along with a very fine mist of water to get the material to lock and hold in place, as you can see on the screen. We don't show the video in this webinar, but I would encourage you to go to jm.com or go to YouTube and search for JM Spider Plus to see videos of this being installed. It's really a neat product where they start from the bottom of the cavity, work their way up, scrub off the excess, which gets vacuumed and recycled back into the hopper, and it gives you a very clean, very thorough installation in an open cavity. Moving into mineral wool, while they just share the name wool, there's not a lot of similarity beyond that between blowing wool and mineral wool. Unlike the fiberglass products we just discussed, mineral wool is made out of molten rock instead of molten glass. The biggest takeaway I have for mineral wool for you guys to remember is that mineral wool is all about fire. Because it is made from molten rock, it has a much higher melting point than fiberglass does. So the sweet spot for MinWool really is all about fire performance. There's a lot of marketing materials out there that promote the sound attenuation properties of MinWool. And while MinWool does a tremendous job at reducing sound transmission, the reality is the human ear cannot detect the difference between properly installed MinWool and properly installed fiberglass. So one of the advantages of working with a company like Johns Manville, which has the wide breadth of insulation products, is that we can be relatively agnostic about all of the materials. So while there's a lot of information out there that suggests MinWool is far superior from a sound transmission perspective, the reality and the science supports that the human ear really cannot detect the difference between the two. So when it comes down to it, MinWool is all about fire performance. So getting into some of our products, starting with the residential SKUs, TempControl is our R value rated product. So this would be what goes in the exterior walls of your home, where R value matters. In Canada, we have our R14, R22, and R28 at various thicknesses. And again, this would be installed where thermal performance is the critical characteristic. Our other residential product is our sound and fire block. This would be installed in your interior walls and in the floors and ceilings of your home with the purpose of reducing sound transmission, as well as to limit fire propagation in the event of a fire situation in your home. So while we do have those residential products, the sweet spot really for MinWool is commercial construction. As I said, it's all about fire performance when it comes down to MinWool. And as you might suspect, in commercial construction where fire codes dominate, that's where MinWool really finds its home, and that's where a vast majority of this material is put into. The largest SKU that we have is our SAFB, or our sound attenuation fire bat. Similar to our sound and fire block, this goes on interior walls and interior floors and ceiling spaces, again, to help halt the spread of fire in case there's a fire event. SAFB comes in a variety of thicknesses, predominantly in 16 and 24-inch widths to fit those steel stud cavities that Brian had discussed before. The biggest advantage that Johns Manville has with our SAFB versus the competition is our compression packaging. JM is able to fit a lot more material in a bag and a lot more material in a truck. This has the obvious advantages of taking up less space in your facility, in your warehouse, fewer trips to the job site since you can get more material on the back of your truck, fewer bags for folks to drag up and down floors on a job site, and just less waste in general, fewer packages to get the job done. And here I won't dwell on this chart, but as you can see, versus our two main competitors, some of the percentages there, depending on the SKU, you can really see some significant benefits of using Johns Manville over the competition in terms of how much material you really are able to get on a truck and in a certain amount of space in your warehouse. Going from the interior of the building to the exterior of the building now, we have our MinWool Curtainwall product. This would go behind a lot of the glass panels you would see in a typical downtown high-rise type of construction, things of that nature. This comes in both faced and unfaced, as you can see in the photo. It comes in a variety of densities. Our Curtainwall 40 is a 4-pound nominal density, and our Curtainwall 80 is an 8-pound density. And as with all of these materials, they come in a variety of thicknesses and widths as desired. Staying on the outside of the building, we have our MinWall product. This was a new product for us in window wall, I'm sorry, a new product for us in 2021. This goes in certain applications, very specific applications where the cement slab of a multi-story building is going to be left exposed to the elements. That cement slab needs to be treated with a thermal insulation, and that's where window wall finds its home. Staying in that part where the cement floor construction meets the exterior wall comes our MinWool Sheathing. As you can see in the diagram to the right, that yellow area is where safing goes. There's typically going to be a little bit of a gap between the cement floor and the exterior cladding of the building. In order to have proper fire performance, those gaps need to be filled with mineral wool. So safing, despite the diagram, comes in typically a 24 by 48 inch bat, which is cut to fit depending on the application. So it gets cut on site, stuffed into that gap. So anytime you see multi-story construction going on, there's very high likelihood that there's going to be safing stuffed into those gaps of that building. And our last product that's on the outside of the building is our JM Cladstone. This product gets installed on the exterior of the building, outside of the exterior sheathing, typically your gyp board in a commercial construction, and that would be covered up by your exterior cladding, whether it be masonry, glass, stone, things of that nature. Cladstone comes in 4 different densities. We have our Cladstone 45, 60, 80, and 110. And as you can see on the screen, those are 4.5 PCF densities, 6.0, 8.0, and 11 PCF, depending on the application. The primary reason to use JM Cladstone is for having continuous insulation on the outside of your building, which we will talk about a little bit more on the next few slides when we get into our Polyiso insulation. And again, similar to what Brian discussed with his products, we have all the pertinent specification compliances, all the testing, all the standards, and so go to jm.com if you need more information for any and all of our products there. So my final product line, as I mentioned, is our Polyiso exterior sheathing. Polyiso has one of the highest R values out there of any rigid board insulation. As you can see, a 6 per inch versus the other foams that are out there. So extremely thermally efficient. One of the advantages of Polyiso is that it can act as both a water and air barrier if you treat the seams and penetrations properly with tapes. You can get rid of independent weather barrier if the application allows for that. But really where Polyiso shines is with continuous insulation, which is one of the biggest trends that we have in insulation today. I won't get into too many of the details here on this call with the limited time, but continuous insulation is really about combating thermal bridging. So as you can see from this slide here, here's a diagram of the inside of the building going on the way out. In this case, you have masonry on the exterior of the building. You have your most likely fiberglass or mineral wool insulation in the cavity here. And each one of these studs, whether it be wood or steel, is an opportunity for your conditioned air to leak out of the building. So by wrapping the building in a continuous layer of insulation, which in the picture here is a layer of AP foil insulation, with you can see the seams and penetrations properly taped so that it can act as an air and vapor barrier as well. So by doing that, you cut off those thermal bridges of those studs and make the building much more thermally efficient. As I said, this is one of the bigger trends going on in insulation today. As code requirements continue to increase, those only go one way. The future is only going to indicate being more thermally efficient with our building. And since you have a limited space in that cavity, the only way to get increased R value is going on the outside of the building. So where you have much more room, you can add layers of insulation. In this case, it's AP foil, but our JM Cladstone also acts as continuous insulation. We also have a new resource on jm.com that focuses on continuous insulation, so I'd encourage all of you to go there for more information on that. Spray foam also acts as a continuous insulation, which Tom will cover on his portion as well. So we have 2 main products in Canada for Polyiso insulation. Our main horse is our AP foil. This comes again in a variety of thicknesses from a 1/2 inch all the way up to 4 inches. And most typically, this is going to be a 4x8 sheet, as you can see in the diagram to the right here. We also have a new product as well, is AP breathing sheathing, which we released last year. This is a breathable polyiso foam. So it has a coated glass facer that allows that material to breathe a bit. In Canada, typical construction is using poly on the inside of the building. So in many applications, there is a reluctance to create kind of a vapor sandwich, if you will, that could trap vapor in the cavity of the building. So in certain applications, a breathable sheathing product is required, which is where AP breathing sheathing comes. Thicknesses are limited here to at 1 to 2 inches. As you get thicker, the material loses some of its breathability, which is why that one is limited more so than some of our other products. And again, lastly, we have all of the proper specification compliances as we do with all of our products. So go to jm.com for more information on that as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Eric. Hey, just for a light recap for everybody, all of JM fiberglass, MinWool, and Polyiso board insulation products are manufactured by Johns Manville. So when we start moving into spray foam insulation, this is the only insulation that Johns Manville does not manufacture. This product itself is manufactured in the field. JM provides the chemicals for contractors who purchase a mobile spray foam insulation manufacturing plant. Then they use our spray foam chemicals to manufacture and apply the finished spray foam insulation, meeting Johns Manville's finished product specifications. Spray foam is a great product. It has the highest R value per inch for any insulation on the market, and that's for Johns Manville is 7 R's per 1 inch, and it's consistent through the full thickness of the product. So a lot of times the competition, when they start getting to 4 inches thick or 2 inches, etc., they start falling from 7 down to 6.5. Ours is consistent throughout the entire thickness of the product. It has superior thermal efficiency because of that. At 1 inch, it controls air coming through a wall. It completely covers gaps and voids, and that's very, very important to control your R value within the plant, and also controls noise out there. Johns Manville's closed cell foam has one of the highest coverages per their 55-gallon drums. The board footage typically is about 4,900 to 5,100 board feet per set. And that's very helpful, especially with the high R value, because you can get more done at one time. And you can do attics, and then you can also have underneath docks, etc. It's closed cell, so it's water resistant. So like all the problems Canada had over in British Columbia, this, if it gets wet, it doesn't really absorb any water. It stays dry, and it doesn't need to be replaced. And also, it really helps when we start looking at the efficiencies, especially up in Canada, where you have such extremes with your chemicals moving from basically, minus 50 below zero to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or sometimes even higher. You have such a big swing. Spray foam is a perfect product for this. Coming in and taking a look at our Corbond IV Canada, this is made with an HFO blowing agent. This meets what the Freon phase-out requirements. It has 0 ODPs and has a very, very low global warming potential. It's a medium density foam, which means it's about 1.9 to 2 pounds per cubic foot. It has very high yield. And again, as I talked before, it does have R7 per inch and can be a vapor retarder at 1.5 inch. We can do a maximum lift of 4 inches without having a fire issue. But up in Canada, you're only allowed at this point in time to do a 2-inch pass. But we can do multiple passes because of our product doesn't burn, that you can do them immediately. Typically with a spray foam, for every 2-inch pass, you would have to wait 20 minutes to come back and spray over that. That's not the case with Johns Manville product. And one thing that's really important in Canada is that the guys can be able to work in a lot of different weathers. The one thing we always point out is when they're applying it, they have to spray the product on a clean, dry, and sound substrate. And that substrate has to have a temperature greater than 7 degrees Celsius or 19 degrees Fahrenheit. If not, then they have to warm up the room before they apply it. So a product that has a wide spread for people to be able to apply it in very difficult cold conditions. The product can be installed in attics, unvented attics, on interiors, ceilings, walls, lights, sill plates, staggered studs, and also can go below ground in the basement with crawl space, plumbing, exterior, especially on the outside, and it can be used as continuous installation and also on the exterior of buildings too. The one thing that you have to be aware of, that any foam insulation burns. So once the product's installed, it needs to be covered with an approved 15-minute thermal barrier. And it then includes the attics. If you're going to be storing anything up in that attic or going up there to do maintenance, that has to have it, and along with all the walls on the interior and in the basement. So with that, I'd like to move on to Tech Connect. As Eric said earlier, Johns Manville is agnostic when it really comes to insulation. We have foam insulation, mineral wool, and then we have our fiberglass insulation. These products are wonderful. Once they're installed, they last the life of the building and they continue to work year after year. The one area where we can have a flaw is during the installation of those products. So what JM has come up with is Tech Connect. We are online, we're on call, and we're on site. And this is free to all of our customers who buy our products. What we want to do is make sure that they understand all the attributes of our products, the health and safety information, the technical guidance. Anytime if they're applying the product, if they need troubleshooting, we're there to help them. We are not, I would say, the designer of systems. We can call and recommend things, but really it falls to the jurisdiction having authority over the installation of the products of what is allowed and not allowed. But we can help you out to make sure that everything is installed correctly so that your customers get exactly what they paid for the life of their buildings. And with that, I am now going to turn it back over to Rachel.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. So before we get to questions, I do want to go over a few resources that we have available over the next few slides. So to begin, I'd like to talk about the source, and it is your access to all things insulation intel. You can access previously recorded webinars and trainings, as well as some educational pieces like our white papers and blogs. And you can access this on jm.com/thesource. This is a great resource for anyone looking for more educational pieces. And as Tom mentioned, we have Tech Connect, and this is also a great resource. The Tech Connect team is available to all JM customers online, on-site, and on-call. These experts are here to help with anything spray foam, including installation, troubleshooting, parts and equipment, or even questions. And then finally, we have the certificate of completion. Everyone who attended today will get a certificate delivered to their inbox next week, and you could use this to submit for additional continuous education learning credits. So that wraps up the available resources. Tom, Eric, and Brian, we can jump into some questions. So the first question is for Tom. Tom, can you please describe the difference between foam insulation and panel insulation, and what are some of the pros and cons?
Okay, nice question there. So the panel foam panels, or the polyiso foam boards, go on the exterior in most cases of buildings. And like Eric pointed out, once that's put on the exterior and you use the right types and fasteners, you don't need to have any type of water-resistant barrier to go on the exterior of the building. Now, with spray foam, that would be applied directly to the outside of a building, and you would not need to have any types of fasteners or tapes, and that would also work really well, especially if it's more than an inch and a half thick, as a vapor barrier and also an air barrier on the exterior of the building. The difference between the two is, again, is if they're buying a board, that can be installed manually, following basic techniques on that. But to install the spray foam, they're going to have a mobile spray foam installation manufacturing rig to be able to do that, and they need to make sure that the outside of that building is really covered, because when you're spraying foam, that stuff will carry in the air, and it always finds the most expensive car to land on, and so then the people have to have those cars cleaned. So they both work, they have the same application, it's just who's installing them and do they know how to do it the right way.
Great, thank you, Tom. The next question is for Brian. how does sound reducing insulation reduce sound?
Thanks, Rachel. So it's a function of the fibrous insulation reducing the sound that's transmitted through the cavity. So there's what's known as a sound transmission coefficient and a noise reduction coefficient. Those are the two variables that are measured in our acoustical laboratory at our technical center, and the insulation itself will reduce the amount of sound that goes through a wall. If you don't have anything and you just have studs and drywall, you'll have around a 30, and typically the code for Canada on multifamily structures is around 50. So by adding the fiberglass or any type of insulation in between, you will exceed that code.
Great, thank you, Brian. The next question is for Eric. Is there a suggestion for water-resistant insulation products?
Sure. We have a couple of different options. So in the mineral wool family, our Cladstone insulation is designed to be water resistant. Again, that is used in exterior rain screen types of applications. So it's actually meant to be subject to some types of moisture. Also, like I mentioned, our AP foil, also when properly addressed at the seams and the penetrations, will also act as a water barrier as well.
Thank you, Eric. Next, questions for Tom. Could you please describe the 15-minute thermal barrier code in a bit more detail that you referenced in the spray foam section?
It's pretty easy, everybody. It's really putting drywall over the spray foam, or there are some coatings that you can buy that are kind of equivalent to that. And if you're going to use a coating, you need to check what we call as our engineering service report. And we have the listed coatings in there that will provide a thermal barrier at the appropriate thickness to allow that the product, if there was a fire in the building, allows people to get out within 15 minutes.
Thank you, Tom. Next question is for Brian. Is there a difference in acoustic properties between regular fiberglass versus sound shield versus mineral wool?
Thanks, Rachel. So I guess the simple answer is not too much. Essentially, the market for sound control insulation is for your interior walls, but that's the same fiberglass insulation that you use for thermal resistance on your exterior walls. It just has different varying thicknesses and achieves roughly the same sound properties. And like Eric mentioned earlier, there is no distinguishable difference between mineral wool and fiberglass from a sound property perspective to the naked ear.
Great, thank you so much, Brian. The next question is for Eric. Where is mineral wool manufactured?
Our mineral wool and our lone mineral wool manufacturing facility is in Phoenix City, Alabama, so in the southeast United States. As a result, we have an extremely limited presence in Western Canada. Virtually all of our existing footprint in Canada is call it Winnipeg East, if you will, just due to the transportation challenges of having just that one facility in North America.
Thank you. My next question is for Tom. What are the pack sizes for spray foam?
Can you ask that again, please?
Sorry, what are the pack sizes for spray foam?
I guess you, is it pack sizes?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, pass. Okay. Oh, pass sizes. Okay. That's when somebody sprays it onto the wall. And in Canada, there's a maximum pass thickness of 2 inches. And then you can follow that up with another 2 inches if they need to get to a specific required R value.
Great, thank you. Brian, could you please describe the key differences between R20, R22 and R24 bat blanket?
Sure. So the fundamental differences are going to be varying density and thickness for the application. R20 is actually manufactured and tested at a 6-inch thickness, even though it's installed in a 5.5-inch cavity in a 2x6 stud application, similar to our R19 down in the States. As you bump up your density, you're able to achieve a higher R value in that same 5.5-inch cavity, and thus achieving the 22 and 24 application.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is for Eric. Does a contractor need to be certified to install Spider Plus?
They do not. Certainly through Tom's Tech Connect team, they're certainly available to walk folks through the process. But unlike spray foam, Spider Plus is a much more simple type of application. You don't have to be an expert installer to kind of get the hang of it after a little bit of time. And the downside of a bad application is far less than would it be in a spray foam. You can basically do over as many times as you'd like with the Spider product. So there is not a certification process for that product.
Great, thank you. My next question is for Tom. Can spray foam insulation be used on metal studs?
Yes, it can, but before you spray on metal studs, you have to make sure that the metal studs are clean. There's a lot of cases where there's oil used on metal studs, and that will cause the insulation to pull away from the stud itself. And we see that quite a bit. So prior to doing any type of application, it's required by the contractor to make sure that the surfaces they're spraying on it are clean, dry, and sound, to make sure that the product's going to stick. Because if there's any oil on there, it's going to cause the cells not to form correctly, and it will be pulling away from the metal. A lot of times we'll see people also try to spray on cardboard. Cardboard is not a sound substrate. And as the building breathes, just like we do, right? When you go from hot to cold, it expands and contracts. Because it's not sound, the foam will pull away from the sides. So you can, but it's got to be clean, dry, and sound.
Thank you so much, Tom. My next question is for Eric. Does mineral wool itch when you install it?
It certainly can. I think by nature, mineral wool tends to be slightly itchier than fiberglass. I think a lot of folks have in their brain this notion of fiberglass being this extremely itchy product. And I think that used to be the case years ago, but fiberization technology has come a long way. Fiberglass is not nearly as itchy as I think historically it has been. Mineral wool in general is just going to be a little bit itchier and dustier, but we recommend proper PPE, so gloves and long sleeves. I've been to our plant running trials, things of that nature. I've gotten it on my hands, on my arms. It's not like you would want to take a nap in the stuff, if you will, but if you get a little bit on you, it's really not that big of a deal. But I guess I would have to say it is slightly itchier than fiberglass, but not in a meaningful way.
Thanks, Eric. The next question is for Brian. With the adoption of this steep code in British Columbia, we're starting to see R60 requirements in the attic. Is it possible to get an R60 bat?
Right now, it's possible to achieve that code with multiple bats. So we're the only manufacturer that even actually creates an R50 bat in line. All of our competitors will actually laminate a couple of different thicknesses to achieve the 50. Currently, we're not capable of creating the 60-inch bat in line, but it can be achieved by pushing two different bats up into there, or laminating bats together, but not at this moment. from us.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Tom. Tom, could you talk about closed cell foam with noise control, and maybe a bit about like a hybrid wall solution using like fiberglass?
Yes, actually, it's probably one of my favorite systems that's out there. Closed cell spray foam does not have, is itself a great sound absorber because it's hard. I mean, you knock on it and it's really solid, so you're going to get reverberation off that. Where it's wonderful for sound is it plugs all the nooks and crannies so sound waves can't get through. So if there is a way, and there's a lot of cases of this, where you put in X amount of spray foam and then you follow it up with fiberglass, that is a surefire system to really control sound very, very well. And if I was building a house, I would definitely consider something like that, because you would trap all any holes that would be penetrations would be sealed, and then you would have the fibrous insulation to absorb any sound. So it's a terrific system, yes.
Thank you so much, Tom. The next question is for Eric. Could you please describe the difference between mineral wool and rock wool?
Sure. Really, it's just preference in which words you want to use. Typically in the industry, mineral wool, rock wool, stone wool are all used interchangeably. Those are most typically just going to be an insulation that's made from molten rock and fiberized. Every once in a while in the broader insulation industry, you do see reference to things like mineral fiber and things like that that can be kind of confusing, that actually incorporate fiberglass, include fiberglass as well. But typically when folks are talking about mineral wool, rock wool, stone wool, they're all talking about the same thing, which is molten rock, fiberized, put into a bat.
Great, thank you so much. And I think this is for everyone. Eric, maybe you could start. Do you have any exterior below grade products, including under foundations?
Sure. Well, our AP foil can be used in that application. So in my product lines, that certainly is an option as well.
Great.
Generally not an area where you're going to use unfaced fiberglass, but Tom might have something.
I would agree with everybody. I would say if I was going to do something below grade, I would either spray the concrete, make sure the concrete wall is clean, dry, and sound, spray it with spray foam. But probably the most likely thing to do is use some AP foil, putting it right on the exterior of the wall. That would be the best way to do it.
Great. Thank you so much. So that wraps up the Q&A. If we did not answer or ask your question live today, we'll be following up separately. One of our technical experts will be reaching out. But besides that, thank you all so much for joining us today. We will be sending an email next week with the recording as well as some valuable resources. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.